Hello there, my fellow myth and fantasy nerds. My name is Tanner, and I'd like to welcome you back to my YouTube channel. First of all, I'd just like to wish everyone a very happy holiday season to you all. Now, this week's video will be part 2 of the Charles Dickens holiday classic, A Christmas Carol. To recap, in last week's video, link up in the cards and in the description down below, we met Ebenezer Scrooge, saw how greedy and miserly he is/was, and how terribly he treated his families, his employees, and strangers, as well as how the ghost of his former business partner, Jacob Marley, told him that he was doomed to share in his undead curse, unless he listened to the other spirits that would visit him and change his ways. So on that note, as always, please make sure to leave a like on this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe down below. Pretty please! It'll help me make more content for you. And without further ado, here is A Christmas Carol Part 2. After a time, Scrooge awoke, and it was so dark he couldn't tell the difference between the night sky outside his window and the walls of his bedroom. His ears were pricked up listening to the chime of his clock. As he listened, he remembered Marley's conversation, and he said to himself, "Didn't Marley say 1 o'clock?" As soon as he said this, the bell rang once, signaling 1 o'clock. And as soon as that happened, Scrooge's room was suddenly ablaze with light, and the curtains of his four-poster bed were suddenly ripped back. Scrooge squinted his eyes as they slowly adjusted, and soon he saw a strange figure in front of him. The figure was almost childlike, and yet also seemed rather like an old man. Their hair, which hung down their neck and back, was a brilliant white, like it is with old age, and yet the face didn't even have a wrinkle, and instead just had the slightest blush on its cheeks. The figure's arms were long and muscular, and the same could be said for their legs and feet. The tunic they were wearing was pure white, and was tied with a belt that appeared to be made of silver. In one hand, the spirit held a branch of holly, and opposing this, the hem of the tunic was wreathed in summer flowers. The strangest thing about the figure was that they were wearing a crown on their head, and the crown was the source of the light that shone all around the room. Under the other arm, opposite the one holding the holly branch, there was tucked a large metal cone, like one would use to extinguish a candle. As Scrooge continued to look at the spirit, they seemed to flicker and change shape. One arm, then one leg, then 20 legs, then a pair of legs with no head, then a head with no body, so on and so forth. "Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?" Scrooge asked, tentatively. "I am," the spirit said. Their voice was low, soft, gentle, as if Scrooge was hearing it from far away rather than right next to him. "Who and what are you?" Scrooge asked. "I am the ghost of Christmas past," came the answer. "Christmas long past?" "Christmas your past." "Spirit, you're quite bright to the eyes," Scrooge remarked. "Is there a way to cover yourself, to dim your light?" "Would you so soon dim the light I give with material hands?" the spirit scolded. "Isn't it enough that your obsessions made this cap that I hold, and forced me over years of training to wear it on my head and dim my light completely?" Scrooge hastily reassured the spirit that he didn't mean to offend them. What business brings you here? Your benefit and your redemption, the spirit replied. Make sure to keep your eyes and your mind open, my good sir. Stand and walk with me. The spirit took Scrooge's arm in a firm grip and gestured to the window. It blew open in a sudden wind. Spirit, do you mean to say we should go out the window? Scrooge asked hesitantly. I am a mere mortal, and I might fall if I'm not careful. The spirit chuckled warmly. A mere touch of my hand here, they said, touching their hand to Scrooge's heart, and you shall be upheld in more than this. As soon as the spirit said this, Scrooge found that his house, his bedroom, in fact, the whole city had dissolved into mist. Soon he and the spirit reappeared in a very familiar location. My goodness, Scrooge said in wonder. I remember this place. I spent my boyhood here. The spirit's touch was still on his arm, and they looked at him softly. Scrooge barely felt the spirit's hand, as his other senses were alive with 1,000 memories, each one triggered by a sight, a sound, a smell, 1,000 hopes, dreams, joys, and cares, all of which were, up until that point, long forgotten. Why, Scrooge, the spirit said playfully, your lip is quivering. And what is that I see running down your cheek? Scrooge hastily wiped his eye and muttered something about a pimple. Gracious spirit, please lead me where you will. Do you remember the way? The spirit prompted. Remember it? Scrooge scoffed. Why, I could walk it blindfolded. Strange that you've forgotten it over the years, the spirit remarked. The two beings, the old human man and the glowing spirit, walked the familiar path, with Scrooge remembering every rock, tree, gate, post, and fence, until they came upon a small town with a market in full swing. Scrooge recognized the church and the river with its bridge crossing it. Some ponies came trotting past them, with young children riding their backs. The children on the ponies called out to other children, either doing their chores or riding carts driven by farmers. All of the children were in high spirits, shouting greetings at each other and laughing, until their voices grew into a merry tune. Scrooge, getting caught up in the cheer in spite of himself, waved at the children, but soon grew discouraged when they didn't wave back. Why don't they stop and wave back? He asked. These are merely memories of the past, the traces of things that have been, the spirit replied. They have no awareness of us. Scrooge and the spirit moved on, and Scrooge, again, in spite of himself, felt his heart leap with joy every time he recognized a younger boy. Why was he happy whenever he heard one of them shout a Merry Christmas to his fellows? I do believe every schoolboy is out and about, celebrating Christmas with his friends, the spirit prompted, and yet the school is not empty. One young boy, abandoned by his friends, is still there. I know, Scrooge said, his heart suddenly weighed down by sadness. The spirit led him down a familiar road, and they soon came upon a large, imposing building, made almost entirely of red bricks, and a large bell in the tower. As Scrooge walked into the building, he remembered the bareness of the hallways, and his memories were filled with thoughts of not enough to eat and too many nights studying by the light of a candle. The spirit led Scrooge into a long and somber classroom, filled with rows and rows of desks and chairs. Sitting at one of these desks was a young boy that Scrooge knew only too well. Scrooge's younger self was engrossed in a book. Scrooge felt the spirit touch his arm, and then noticed them pointing a finger at his younger self. Suddenly a man with dark skin and dressed in colorful clothes appeared out of the book, with an axe tucked into his belt and leading a donkey laden with wood. "Good heavens!" Scrooge said. "It's Ali Baba. I remember one Christmas when I was all alone, he did come to play. I remember other times with other characters: Valentine, his brother Orson, Robinson Crusoe and his parrot and Friday, Aladdin and his genie, and the Sultan's wicked adviser." At this, Scrooge soon changed his tune from happiness to self pity with the phrase, "Oh, you poor boy." Scrooge wiped a tear that was forming in his eye. "It almost makes me wish. Oh, but I'm sure it's too late now." "What is the matter?" the spirit said gently. "Nothing, really. It's just there was a boy singing a Christmas carol outside my door last night. I just wish I could have given him something, is all." The spirit nodded sagely, and then waved their hand, saying, "Let us see another Christmas, shall we?" The years seemed to pass before Scrooge's eyes, and he saw his younger self grow older and older as the room crumbled and aged all around him. Soon the time grew normal again, and Scrooge saw his younger self pacing gloomily. Older Scrooge glanced over at the spirit, and then towards the door, knowing immediately who was about to barge in. "Dear brother!" came a voice, and the door to the room opened, revealing a young girl, who, as soon as she saw young Scrooge, ran towards him and gave him a hug. "I've come to bring you home." "Home, dear Fran?" younger Scrooge asked her. "Yes," the little girl Fran said, her face a beacon of joy. "Home, forever and ever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he once was, and home's now almost like heaven. He was tucking me into bed one night, and he was so gentle with me I was able to work up the courage to ask if you could come home. And he said, yes, he should. He sent me in a coach to bring you, and you're never going to come back here. We're going to be together all Christmas long and have the jolliest time in the world." Young Scrooge chuckled at his little sister. "You've become quite the young lady, haven't you?" She giggled and started tugging on his arm as she led the way to the carriage. "Your sister was such a fragile girl," Christmas Past remarked, "who might have wilted at the slightest breeze. But she had such a large and tender heart." "You're quite correct there," Scrooge murmured. "I won't deny it." "She died as a young woman," the spirit continued. "And do I understand she had children?" "One child," Scrooge said sadly. "Fred, my nephew." The spirit then touched Scrooge gently on the shoulder, and they turned to find themselves in a very busy street, in front of a very familiar warehouse. "Does this place feel familiar to you, Scrooge?" the spirit asked him. "Of course," Scrooge said. "I was apprenticed here." They made their way inside the warehouse, where they found an older gentleman wearing a knitted cap and sitting at a desk so tall that if he were 2 inches taller his head would have bumped against the ceiling. "Blessed be!" Scrooge said, in a mixture of shock and delight. "It's old Fezziwig, alive and well." Fezziwig looked up at the clock, which was just approaching 7 o'clock at night, and laid down his pen. He stood up, straightened his rather large vest, and rubbed his hands together, laughing from his head to his feet. "Ho, Ebenezer! Richard!" he called out in a booming voice. A younger Scrooge walked in quickly, with another apprentice following just behind him. Why, it's Richard Wilkins, older Scrooge said to the spirit. He was always nipping at my heels, almost attached to my hip. No more work tonight, boys, Fezziwig said jovially. It's Christmas Eve. Let's have the shutters closed before a man can say Jack Robinson. No sooner had he said those words, the two young apprentices started closing the shutters as quick as he can. Come now, boys, said Fezziwig. Let's clear the place out, make us some room, before the guests arrive. No sooner was it said than it was done. Nothing that could be mopped and cleared away was left where it was. The floor was swept and mopped, the lamps were lit, fuel was added to the fireplace, and soon the warehouse was just as warm and as cozy as any grand ballroom. Soon the guests started arriving. First was a troupe of musicians, who immediately made their way up to the balcony and tuned their instruments. Then came in Mrs. Fezziwig, her face broken in a wide smile, who was soon followed in by the three Fezziwig daughters, whose faces were also quite radiant. Then they were followed in by the six suitors, all of whom hoped to have the hand of one of them by the end of the party. In came the young business men and women, the maid, her cousin the baker, the cook, and her brother's friend the milkman. One by one the guests filed in, some shy, some daring, some elegant, some clumsy, until soon the whole warehouse was filled with 20 dancing couples. After the initial dance, there came a bountiful feast, with every food imaginable. And then the dancing started up again, with Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig leading the guests. Ah, there were 23 or 24 couples dancing along with them, and yet those two were more than a match for the other dancers. They were partners in every sense of the word, and if there's any higher praise than that, believe me, I'll use it. Soon the clock struck 11, and Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their places on either side of the door and shook hands with every single guest leaving the party, until it was just the two apprentices left. All the while Scrooge was completely enraptured by the whole ordeal. His whole being was taken over with wonder at the scene, and as he remembered every part of it, he was experiencing the strangest disturbance of spirit. It wasn't until the end of the night, when it was just him staring at the faces of his younger self and Richard, his fellow apprentice, that he remembered Christmas past, and he turned to see them staring at him, the light streaming from them clear and bright. This is such a paltry thing, yet these foolish people are grateful for it, they remarked. What do you mean, paltry? Scrooge asked them, offended. The spirit showed him how his past self and Richard were singing Fezziwig's praises, and then said, Fezziwig has only spent around 3 or 4 pounds of your mortal money. Is that so much that he deserves such applause? It's not that at all, Scrooge replied. He had the power to make our lives pleasant or unpleasant, to make our job easy or hard, a delight or a chore. If his power was merely words and looks, things so insignificant you can't even count them, so what? The joy he gave us is as great as if it cost him a fortune. His voice trailed away, and Christmas Past stared at him. What's the matter? Nothing in particular. Are you sure? I just wanted to say a few words to my clerk just now, that's all. My time grows short. Quickly now, said the spirit. Soon they were sitting in a very familiar office, and Scrooge once again saw his younger self. Here Scrooge was in the prime of his life, and though his face wasn't as harshly lined as it was going to be, there were still some signs of greed and ambition that would only grow as time went by. Young Scrooge wasn't alone in the room, but was accompanied by a young woman wearing a dress usually worn for a funeral. Her tears sparkled in the spirit's light. "It doesn't matter to you, Ebenezer," she said softly. "Another desire's replaced me, and if it can provide comfort to you in the coming future, then I have no reason to mourn." "Belle," came the reply, "what desire has replaced you?" "A golden one." "Well, this is the honest business of the world," young Scrooge said. "There is nothing the world criticizes harsher than poverty, and there's nothing it allegedly criticizes as the hunt for riches." "You worry too much about what the world thinks," Belle answered softly. "All your hopes and dreams have been swallowed up by the desire to be above rebuke. I have seen all of your worthier ambitions disappear one by one until the main desire, greed, completely enthralls you. Am I wrong?" "So what?" he asked. "Even if I've grown cleverer, that doesn't mean that my feelings for you have changed." She shook her head. "Have they?" "Our commitment towards each other was made when we were both poor, and yet okay with being poor, until we were able to improve our funds by our patient business. You have changed. When our pledge was made, you were another man entirely. I was a child. There you go. Your own feelings are telling you that you aren't what you were. I am." She wiped her tears and then continued. "The things that guaranteed us joy when our hearts were one is heavy with torment now that we're two. I won't say how much I've thought of this or how deliberately. It's enough that I have, and now I release you from our engagement." "I haven't asked for release, have I?" "Not in words, no." "Then what?" "In a changed heart, a reformed character, another dream, in everything that made my love for you worth anything to you. If you hadn't known me until now, would you still want my hand?" "Well, you don't seem to think so," he replied. "Believe me, if I could think otherwise, I gladly would," she said to him. "I know how charming such a thought must be. But if you were free and able, today, yesterday, tomorrow, can I even hope that you would choose me, a girl with no dowry? You who measure people by how much money they have? Even if you did, if you were so able to ignore your greed to do so, wouldn't regret and bitterness follow without fail?" "I think so. So, with a heart full of the love of the man I once loved, I release you." With that, she turned to leave. He was about to say something else when she said, "You may feel sad at this. I almost wish the memory of our love does. But I'm sure the pain will go away as soon as it comes, and you'll gladly let go of it, thinking it was a worthless thought that you'll only be too happy to forget. I hope you're content with this path you've chosen." As they parted, old Scrooge turned to the spirit and said, "Please take me back home, spirit. Why does me remembering these painful memories make you happy? We have another event to see. The spirit waved their hand, and Scrooge saw Belle, older, sitting in a room next to a hearth, which was burning cheerfully. The room itself was full of children, shouting and playing happily together. There were so many, and they were scattering back and forth so much, Scrooge couldn't tell exactly how many children there actually were. Soon a knocking on the door could be heard, and an older man, the father of all these children, with arms full of Christmas presents, was caught up in the swarm of young children. Once the father peeled himself from his younger children. He sat down next to his wife and his oldest daughter. When Scrooge saw this, he felt a pang of longing. The thought of someone just as graceful and full of promise as her mother calling him father was almost too much to bear. "Oh, Belle," the man said, "I just remembered. I saw an old friend of yours earlier today." "Really? Who? Take a guess." "Oh, really, darling, you're such a tease." She thought for a moment and then said, "Mr. Scrooge?" "As a matter of fact, yes," came the reply. "I walked by his office window. It wasn't closed, and there was a candle lit. I just couldn't help seeing him. I hear his partner's at death's door, and Scrooge was sitting alone." Scrooge turned to the spirit and said, in a voice that could be only described as disheartened, "Please take me away from here, spirit. I can't take much more of this." "I told you, Scrooge," the spirit replied. "These are merely the memories of the things that have already happened. They are what they are. Do not blame me for them." "Please, spirit, take me home this instant." Scrooge turned, and he saw the spirit's face flickering. In one moment he saw Fezziwig, then Belle, then Franny. The spirit's face was changing, fragmenting, taking on the features of every single face from Scrooge's past. The spirit was also glowing, even brighter than before, and Scrooge was taken aback. Then, noticing the spirit's extinguisher cap, Scrooge swiftly took it from them, and with a cry of "Spirit, haunt me no longer!" slammed the cap down on the spirit's head. The cap was so big it covered the spirit's entire body, but no matter how much Scrooge tried, he could still see their light streaming from the bottom. Soon enough, Scrooge suddenly noticed a wave of exhaustion, and soon after, he was also mindful of the fact that he was in his own bedroom again. He gave the extinguisher cap a squeeze, as if to say farewell, and just barely made it to bed before finally slipping into a deep sleep. And there we have it. That was part 2 of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. If you liked this video and you want more, please consider leaving a like and subscribing down below so you don't miss any new content from me. Also, if you have any other ideas you want to see in any future videos, please leave your suggestions in the comments down below. Who knows? It might just happen. Alright, well, that's all the time I have for this video, so I'll see you all next week with A Christmas Carol Part 3. See you guys then.